Andre thought he was mature enough to enter this marriage with calm and patience, but lately he has felt as if he's being dragged away from the version of himself he once took pride in. He isn't losing control because he's weak, he's losing control because, for the first time, he understands what it means to be placed second in the heart of the woman he loves, at the exact moment she needs protection the most. Ever since Dani learned she carries the BRCA gene, the air inside their home has changed. It hasn't turned loud or explosive, but it has grown heavy, like a cold mist clinging to every corner, making every word harder to say and every glance loaded with meaning. Dani isn't facing a simple test result, she's facing a shadow hanging over her future, a brutal reminder that her own body may betray her at any time. In that moment, Andre believed she would turn to him by instinct, because he is her husband, the one still standing when everything becomes uncertain, the one who promised to stay beside her even if the world collapses. But what hurts Andre most is that Dani hasn't reached for him the way he expected. Instead, her instincts keep pulling her toward Bill, the man from her past, the one who once made her feel deeply loved and deeply wounded, the one she tried to leave behind so she could begin a different life. At first, Andre tried to convince himself it was only temporary, that Dani was simply clinging to a familiar memory, something steady enough to hold on to, while fear was swallowing her whole. He understood that panic drives people back to what once felt safe, even when that place no longer fits. But the more Andre tried to understand, the more abandoned he felt. Dani never said it outright, yet the shift appeared in small details, in the way she kept her phone closer than before, in the unnatural stretches of silence, in the distant gaze that suggested she was calculating something he wasn't allowed to touch. She began mentioning Bill with a careful unease, as if saying his name alone could make something inside her tremble. Whenever Andre walked into a room and found Dani lost in thought, he could no longer be certain he was the center of her world. That feeling wasn't like betrayal in a clear, obvious way. It was like warmth being quietly pulled out of his hand, little by little, until he realized he was holding nothing but emptiness. He never wanted to become the kind of husband who controls, and he never wanted to turn Dani's fear into a power struggle. But that restraint only tore him apart even more. He forced himself to play the patient man, the rational husband, while inside him a silent anger kept growing like a fire with nowhere to escape. Andre hated himself for feeling jealous at the exact moment Dani was most fragile. He hated the small-minded impulse creeping through his blood like poison. He hated that he started looking at Bill as a real threat rather than an old shadow. Andre once believed he had defeated the past, that his marriage to Dani was something solid and new, but now a single genetic result had stained that new beginning with old colors, and Andre stood there listening to his heartbeat like an alarm he couldn't shut off. What Andre couldn't endure was the fact that Bill wasn't just someone Dani once loved, he was the kind of man who could shake every decision she made, simply by existing near her. Bill could step toward Dani with the confidence of someone who once held her heart. He could use familiarity as a key and slide straight into cracks Andre hadn't even reached yet. Andre saw it more clearly than anyone. In Dani's world, Bill represented a time that was chaotic, destructive, and yet intensely alive, and sometimes that intensity becomes the very thing people crave when they're staring into the fear of illness. Andre wasn't naive. He knew BRCA didn't only make Dani anxious about her health, it pushed her into terror about identity, about femininity, about motherhood, about whether she would still be herself after the brutal choices treatment might demand. And in that terror, Dani could be drawn back toward Bill if he were proof that she was once loved so fiercely, once placed at the center of a man's universe. But Andre also knew love wasn't math, and fear doesn't obey logic. Dani never said it out loud, yet she began behaving as if Bill was the only person who fully understood her history, the only one entitled to share this pain with her. Andre tried to stay close, tried to hold steady, tried to turn those dark days into something survivable. Yet the harder he tried, the more he felt Dani slipping away in subtle, unbearable ways. He couldn't force her to stop being afraid, but he also couldn't tolerate being shut out every time she panicked. Dani's silence became a weapon without form, leaving Andre hurt and furious without knowing how to respond, without becoming the villain. And then Andre's breaking point arrived in a way he didn't expect. It wasn't a loud argument or a dramatic public confrontation. It was the sharp, icy decision to draw a line. The moment Andre realized Bill was trying to see Dani, he couldn't stand aside any longer. There are limits a husband cannot swallow again and again just to appear noble. Andre stepped into the situation with the fierce urgency of a man defending his last piece of territory, Dani's heart and the marriage he had built his entire belief upon. He blocked Bill. He stopped him from reaching Dani as easily as before. And in that moment Andre wasn't only stopping a meeting, he was stopping an entire chain of possibilities that could destroy them. Andre's threat wasn't simply a warning. It was the voice of a man drowning in the fear of not belonging. He didn't want to be cruel, but he refused to let Bill keep pushing his way deeper into Dani's life, while she was at her weakest, because that is when people are easiest to guide, easiest to claim. Andre feared Dani would start seeing Bill as her lifeline. He feared she would mistake comfort for love, nostalgia for the present, a familiar embrace for the future she needed to build. And that fear hardened Andre until he felt cold even to himself. In Bill's eyes, Andre might have looked like a jealous, selfish husband, but Andre knew the truth. If he didn't stop this now, he would lose Dani quietly, without noise, and one day he would wake up to find his marriage was nothing but an empty shell. Bill, of course, wasn't the type to back down. He carried the arrogance of a man who believes he can reclaim anything that once belonged to him. Bill looked at Andre like an obstacle, not like the husband Dani had chosen. That alone was enough to make Andre burn. Andre felt insulted, not just because Bill wanted to see Dani, but because Bill acted as if he had the right. In moments like that, Andre wasn't even sure Bill came out of genuine concern or out of pride that refused to accept defeat. Bill could be trapped in his own marriage to Haley, searching for a way out, and Dani with all her unresolved pain might be the easiest door for him to walk through. Andre saw that danger clearly, like a knife left on a table. It hadn't cut anyone yet, but a single slip could spill blood, and Dani, at the center of all of it, was caught between forces she couldn't control. She was facing the future of her body, and she was also facing a question even more terrifying. Who could she lean on when everything fell apart? The harsh truth was that Dani was panicking, and when people panic, they don't act according to what is morally correct, they act according to instinct. Dani was reaching for Bill more often because she wanted to return to the past, but because Bill was a history she could never erase. Bill knew who Dani was before she hardened, before she trained herself to survive, before she learned to hide fear behind composure. With Bill, Dani didn't have to pretend she was fine, and that became a dangerous temptation at the exact moment she felt her life slipping out of her hands. But Dani couldn't ignore Andre either. Andre was her present, the man who shared her days, the man who stayed not out of obligation but out of love. Dani could see his anger, could see the wound behind his firmness, and she couldn't pretend she didn't know. Andre's threat left Dani both frightened and exhausted. She feared her marriage was turning into a battlefield right when she needed peace the most. She was tired of explaining, tired of reassuring, tired of playing the role of the stable woman, while inside her was a cliff edge. Dani didn't want to choose between two men in a simple win or lose sense, but the situation was pushing her toward a decision even though she wasn't ready. From Bill's side, the biggest question wasn't whether he still loved Dani, it was whether he would dare to abandon Haley and return to what he left behind. Bill was a man who always wanted control of the game, and Dani, carrying the BRCA gene, have awakened in him a savior instinct. But was that instinct real love or simply the thrill of power, the satisfaction of proving he could still be the most important man in her life? Bill might have been looking at Dani as his chance to be the hero, to show he could step into her world at the moment she was weakest. But Andre saw the danger. Bill might come to calm Dani's panic, yet he might also come to feed his ego, to stamp his name onto her life again, as proof he never truly disappeared. That is why Andre and Bill's confrontation wasn't just a fight over a woman. It was a fight over who had the right to be the one she leaned on in the storm. Andre wanted Dani to choose him because it was correct, but because it was the only thing that would keep him from feeling meaningless inside his own marriage. Bill wanted Dani back, maybe out of love, maybe out of obsession, maybe out of wounded pride that couldn't accept the end. And Dani wanted to breathe without being poured into directions. But she was living through a moment where every decision could leave a scar. The longer Dani hesitated, the more dangerous everything became. Because silence isn't always peace, it can be the empty space where someone else steps in. The harder Andre tightened his boundaries, the more Dani felt trapped at the exact time he needed freedom to face her fear. The closer Bill moved, the more Andre felt the threat of loss, and with each passing day, the marriage stretched thinner. None of them truly wanted to destroy everything, but all of them were standing on a fragile edge where one emotional moment could become a catastrophe. And at the center of it all, Dani understood a truth she still couldn't say aloud. Her life could change at any moment, and she no longer had time to live in uncertainty. If she chose Andre, she had to choose him completely, not out of duty, not to do what looked right, but because she trusted he would remain even if the worst happened. If she let Bill come closer, she had to accept that the past would never stay in the past again. It would become the deepest crack in her present. But Dani was afraid, and that fear wasn't only the fear of illness, it was the fear of losing control over her life, and losing the right to be loved in the way she needed most. Andre looked at Dani and saw not only the woman he married, but someone slipping from his hands in a way he couldn't reach. Bill looked at Dani like a door opening at the exact moment his own life was full of contradictions, and Dani stood between them, feeling as if she was being pulled out of her own body, forced to face both the threat of her future and the collapse of a present she once believed was stable. While everyone kept telling themselves this was only a phase, that everything would return to normal, one thing was becoming clearer with every day. From the moment Dani learned she carried the BRCA gene, nothing around her could remain the same. Every relationship would either transform or break, and Dani's choice, no matter who she chose, would never be just about love. It would be the choice that defined her entire life in its darkest hour.